Our goal for today is actually one thing and one thing only, and that is to show you how you can use AI to uncover growth signals from your customer data. And the way I'm going to show you is not just some tools or hacks. What I'm going to show you is an approach in which it will actually save you real time and make you more effective. This is the exact same process and method that I show my students in my class. And I'm going to share that with you. Now, in today's class, I'm actually going to focus on uncovering signals or growth signals from customer app reviews. But this approach can be used across all types of customer feedback. You can do it across customer interviews. You can do it across ticket data. You can do it across any data that you have. Now, in order for us to do that, let's start this slideshow. Yes. Okay. Now, in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you two approaches. I'm going to show you a structured approach, and I'm going to show you an unstructured approach. And each one has its place in how you actually automate your work or use AI to help you become more productive. We're going to compare the two approaches and when you use which one and why. And then we're going to double click or we'll double down on the structured approach. I'm going to break it down to you and see how you can get more out of AI, right? And then we'll have a healthy Q&A. I'm happy to stick around if there's questions after that. Does that sound like a good use of your time today? I see nods, which is always good. Thank you. So before we go anywhere, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mustafa. I actually used to run product at Google, where we built innovation accelerators. I had accelerators all around the world in which Googlers and customers would come together and build products. Prior to that, I used to run product at IBM. And at IBM, I had this interesting role in which I first started with running the product. I was a CPO for one of their products. And then they asked me to turn that into a management consulting practice in which we actually helped customers move from a project to a product perspective. I've been doing this for a long time. I love product. I can talk till the cows come home. Sometimes my wife tells me I don't even need an audience. About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I left Google trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And I really started focusing on how we can use AI to do two things. First is to help PMs be more efficient. And second is to help PMs be more effective. And you'll see the efficiency and effectiveness throughout this entire place. Listen, I've run teams that are large, they're small, they're medium, and they've always been two things. Number one is PMs take too long to do certain activities. And most of those are tedious activities. And second is that some PMs, even if you give them time, they have a hard time trying to be more strategic. So we're going to talk about how we can do both with AI. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn. I love getting connections from product managers. You can also check out my newsletter, where I share basically 90 to 95% of everything that I teach in class for free. Yeah. As for the resources for today, you can click on a link. I actually put this in the chat as well. And so it will have the recording, it will have the prompt playbook that I'm going to share with you. It will give you a link to the newsletter, and then of course my LinkedIn connection. So with that being said, let's kind of jump into it, which is why we're here, right? So I'm going to share with you both a structured and unstructured approach. And for that, I'm actually going to introduce you to Anna. Anna is actually a real student of mine. Just the name has changed to protect the innocent. To give you a little bit about Anna, she works at Figma. She's passionate about building great products. She's a senior PM. And today she's been given the task to identify growth signals through her app review data. So let's take a look at that. And I'm going to jump around here. So all Anna did was go into the App Store and just download the data, right? And so in this one, I think I have about 100 rows, maybe 80 rows, just to make it quick. But you can do this across as many as you like. And you can see it's fairly unstructured. It has a lot of stuff in which you have things like this. You have the title, the content, you have the ratings and versions. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to find out growth signals from here. So the first approach is just a simple unstructured approach, right? And with unstructured approach is usually what I see most PMs who come to my course use. And it is as simple as this, right? Let's go here. I'm going to use Claude, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I'm going to actually attach the Figma file. And here we go. And an unstructured approach could be as simple as, you know what, actually I have it somewhere. It could be as simple as just a simple query, right? Can you please analyze the text document for growth signals? Let's take a look at what the AI generates for us. And I'm going to tell you, there's a place for unstructured approaches and there's a place for structured approaches. And we're going to go through that as well. Now, AI is going to do its thing. It always takes a few minutes to analyze data for Claude or OpenAI for that matter. If it takes too long, I did.
How did AI understand what you meant by growth signals?
So that is what happens when you actually use an unstructured approach, right? So here is AI's interpretation of what it means to be a growth signal. So let's get rid of this. Let's actually take a look at the content itself. And so when you put in growth signals in AI, here's what it comes down with. Like it gives you an overall rating performance. It gives you some trends of saying how many, what are the versions and what's the average rating for versions. It does give you some positive indicators, some areas of concern and recommendations. And what I've seen in here is this is how most PMs start their task. And then what they end up doing is that they end up then sparring with the AI to actually get to what they want. The problem I have with using a unstructured approach like this is that it is not really actionable, right? This is what I call the baseline of what you can get out of AI. Well, you guys are not here today to learn about the baseline. Here, you guys are here about how do you get even more out of it. Something in which it's actionable, something in which I believe the question was asked is how do you know what it means to be a growth signal? By the way, and so we can actually define that in AI and how we can actually use the AI to actually do most of the heavy lifting, right? So this is what you get, and most people will spar with it, and they'll probably get something out of it. And sometimes you get great answers, sometimes you get frustrated, but ultimately, this doesn't actually save you a lot of time. It just gets you started. So now let's take the addition of a structured approach. And with the structured approach, I'm actually going to take you through 4 steps. The first one is I'm actually going to take you through what is a prompt playbook, in which I have a library of prompts. From there, we're going to pick a well-structured question or a well-structured prompt. We're going to run it. We're going to figure out we're going to run it within a copilot so we can get personalized results. And then we're going to drive even deeper insights. So I know that's a mouthful, so just watch me. And then I'm going to show it to you one time, and then we're going to break it down, right? So and you guys should have access to this, or you guys have access to a playbook. Let me see if this is the right one. No, this is not the right one. Here you go. So first things first is a structured approach is you want to have a playbook of all the prompts that you use again and again. In this case, we want to look at growth signals. So identify growth signals. Here, I'm actually being very specific with the AI in which what I really want them to do. I want them to identify positive feedback, which is my acquisition signals, negative feedback, which is your churn signals, and features requested, which is my growth opportunities. I'm going to take this whole thing Now I'm going to actually start a new chat pod. I'm going to add this piece to it. I'm going to add the Figma file again. And then I'm actually going to use a copilot that I've created for Anna. And now we're going to run that same, well, we're going to try to do the same task again with just a little bit differently. And you'll notice the quality of results that you get when you actually use a well-structured prompt. And you actually define what it means to be a growth signal. There you go. Sorry, let me. So if you look at this, this is a lot more actionable. Number one, it gives you positive feedback. It tells you real-time collaboration, team sharing. It tells you how many times it's been mentioned. It tells you where negative feedback is of churn. There's issues with performance. It tells you how many times it's mentioned. It tells you what the growth opportunities are. And it gives you a quick summary of what you can do. Now this, compared to what we saw last time, is a lot more actionable. Sorry, I seem to have lost my screen. Give me a second. There you go. So this one is a lot more actionable, right? You can actually do something with this data. You can actually go in and say, you know what, I actually want to double down on what these performance issues are, and you can do that. You can actually go in and say, what are the 9 issues that you want? And that will give you more data. This itself is much better than just using the generic one or the generic response. And you can even go in and say, because you actually ran this in your Copilot, you can say, you know what, I actually want to, let's pick one. I want to solve this one, right? And so I can go in. Sorry, I'm having, there you go. My screen is glitching. I apologize. Give me a second here. Okay. I can go in and I can say, can you tell me more about which one did we say? This one? Performance. Let's do performance since there's 9 of them. And so now it's actually going to take a look at data and you can actually talk to your data in a way. And so here you go. You can actually now go in and go deeper. Because you have actually, because the way you've asked the question, it is actually now able to query back and forth. Now you can go in and say, okay, you know what? I actually want to, let's take it further. So yes, you can always chat with data, which is great, but let's take it further and actually make it more personal, right? So let's say that I want to solve this one. Let's just take that one and say, I want to work on this. Is this aligned with my team's OKRs? And because you actually ran it in Anna's personal Copilot, it's actually going to take a look and see how this aligns with the OKRs that you mentioned. So it goes in and says, yes, you can address these performance issues with 2 key OKRs, and it tells you what the OKs are. So now you're taking the data that you just did with the growth signals and you're actually using it to actually do even more than what AI can do by actually just doing a much more structured approach. You can even say, and by the way, I've trained the AI or the Copilot to know not just about the OKRs, but I've trained the Copilot to know about Anna's organization structure. So as you can tell, it tells you that these are the people that may be interacted, that that you might want to talk to. So you can always say that, you know what, I want to share this with Clara. Clara is her manager. How, what is the best way? Let's say, what is the best way? And now, because you've trained it on who Clara is and what is her preference, you can actually go even further. So it tells you what is the best way to communicate with her. Let's actually ask a better question. How do I share? How do I communicate? And it will actually give, I think it will give you an agenda if I'm not mistaken. There you go. So if you want to actually, it actually give you, you can be more specific. You can say, I actually have a meeting, but this one, it chose an email and saying, based on Clara's profile and communication preference, here's how you do it. And it actually gives you an email that you can then use. Now you can also say, well, before I talk to Clara, who else should I talk to? And so you'll notice that not only did we actually use a well-structured prompt to get us deeper insights than just a generic unstructured request, but we've also taken it and by training AI on our context, we can actually go much further. These are all the steps we as PMs have to do, right? It's not just the analysis piece, but we have to then go back and say, okay, how does this align with my organization's priorities? What's the best way for me to communicate this with my manager? How do I actually, who else do I need to talk to? And so it'll tell you who to go to. And again, this is all based on the fact that you've actually trained AI on your organization. And so when I talk about, let us use a structured format, I really am talking about how do you get the most out of AI? And what that means for us is that it actually saves us a whole ton of time. And by having an AI as a co-pilot or a coach, it makes us much more effective. So I know we have a bunch of questions, so let me actually go do a comparison of the two, and then I'll take questions. Yes? And by the way, you can spar with AI the whole time. If you had specific questions on how to talk to Marcus, what is the best way to do it? There's a lot of things that you can actually do within the context of what we just did. And so if you compare the two, let's go back. So if you compare the two, it really comes down to what it is that you want to do, right? If you just use the unstructured approach, which is what most PMs do, you're going to get something that's just generic response. There's going to be no personalization. I call this the 20-80 effort. And what that means is the AI is going to do 20% of the work, and you still have to do the 80% of the work. You still have to do the sparring, editing, and refining. It's not repeatable. So you can ask that same question again, but based on the response, you might actually get a different response. I guarantee if I go back and ask, can you give me growth signals? It's going to give me a very different response because the AI is going to just pick and choose what it means to be a growth signal. And so it really doesn't save you a lot of money. Maybe you want to. Now you could say, well, why do I even need that? Like, why should I even use an unstructured approach if it's not giving me any of these things? I actually use unstructured approach because when I actually want to build a prompt, I use it to just figure out what the baseline is. It's a quick and dirty way to get something done and for me to know what the baseline is. And I like knowing the baseline because then I know how much more I can push AI to do my work for me. So without knowing the baseline, it's very hard to know, are you getting the most out of AI? Now, as opposed to a structured approach, It's a completely opposite. Number one is your responses are specific and actionable. You could see the difference between the generic one just gave a distribution of ratings. The specific ones gave you positive, negative, and most features requested, right? It's personalized, and we saw the chat back and forth about it knows about ANA or OKRs or organization. This is what I call the 80-20 effort, in which the LLM is doing the heavy lifting for you. And you or ANA is the one who's actually making the critical decisions. Remember, the AI is not making decisions for you, right? The AI is just giving you responses based on the queries you ask. Anna was the one who said, well, I'm going to pursue this one. Anna's the one who said, well, let me figure out how to go and talk to Clara and how I should do it. And the good news is that this is repeatable. By having a playbook in which you actually have all your well-structured prompts, you can actually go in and do it again and again. You just have to change the input data. And the whole point of all of this stuff is that it saves you a lot more time. In Anna's case, when we actually did it, it actually saved her 9 hours. And it made her more effective because now she could use a co-pilot to do some of the work for her. And so this is the way to maximize your productivity and boost your impact as a PM. Now, I'm going to break down what we just did. It went through what we just did very fast. I'm going to break down each one of the steps again. But before we do that, let me actually see if I know this question. So let's go to the questions. Let's see. Where can we access this file? At the top of the chat, there's a link. And in that link, you'll actually have all the resources from this lighting sessions. These prompts are specific to Claude, or can they be used for ChatGPT, for example? What's the difference between what you're showing and a sentiment analysis? Those are great questions. Christoph, I'm actually going to answer this in the next. I'm going to answer your the question about can we use over Claude versus ChatGPT in the next slide, and the difference between what you're showing and a sentiment analysis. Listen, there's different ways to actually to identify growth levers and signals, right? When I used to run product, I always used to tell people to figure out what people like, figure out what people don't like, and figure out what people want the most. And you can always turn that into a growth signal. So in many ways, you do start with the sentiment analysis. Now, if you have something else that you want to analyze with, so you can put that into the instruction, and we can actually talk about what that looks like in the instructions in actually the next slide. Would it be possible to share a prompt? Yes, there is. Again, like I said, if you go to the top of this chat, there's a link. I actually have the playbook of my top 5 most popular prompts, and in there, I have actually included this prompt. Can you scroll back up? I missed the previous prompt. Pile, like I said, you will actually have the entire prompt if you look at if you go to the link on the top, and I'm actually going to walk you through the prompt in the next section. And yes, it is being recorded. Actually, you know what? Oh. You know what, Paya? I apologize. This is not being recorded. I thought it actually started on its own. So, by the way, I'm actually running the same session tomorrow. So if you don't get this session, I'm gonna take this session and I'll upload it. I thought it was supposed to record it on its own. There must be a change in the way Zoom does it. What does running it with a co-pilot add to the results? I think that's fantastic. Oh, I see the value now. Great. Do you have any good templates that you can share that will help us build a similar co-pilot? Joel, that's a very good question. Let me see. I'm going to go through step by step and I will share that with you, right? Please share the link file. There's a link at the end of this slide too, so I'll do that. So is your reasoning for using chat versus Claude versus GPT that you can create an agent and co-pilot using context rather than having to spar for longer? ChatGPT give the unstructured approach without a trained agent. Are there any upsides for ChatGPT? You know what? This is a great question. There is actually a strategy about picking which LLM to use for what task. and understanding the nuances of the LLMs is just as important as to what you ask the question. So where you ask the question is just as important. And so there's a reason why I actually asked it in Claude, because in my opinion, Claude has a much better analysis than ChatGPT does, except for O1. O1 is much better at analysis than 4.0, in my opinion, from the results I've seen. Now, 1.01 allows you to actually attach documents. You can actually run the same process that we had in ChatGPT. The way I've written the prompts, the way I write my well-structured prompt, is that it is an LLM agnostic. You can run the same task, multiple large language models, and it will give you good results. It's not showing up the chat, so I apologize. So let's go back here. This is the link. I'm going to put it right here. Let me see if folks join after you added the link, they won't see it. Great. Thank you for that. Let me just go back to the questions. Lots of questions on link. Hopefully you guys have it. Cannot see the prompt. So let's do this. It's 10:29. I'm almost out of time, but I'm happy to actually do a breakdown. So if you guys can stick around, that's great. I also apologize for the recording. I'm not sure why it didn't start on its own, but I'm actually running the same session tomorrow. So I will take that recording and I'll put it up. Christoph, what's the magic behind having prompt agnostic to LLM? Is because you can run the same query in different LLMs and you can actually get different types of responses, especially when you're doing brainstorming. Tomorrow at what time? I'm doing it at 9 a.m. in Maven as well. So I'll add a link to that session. And I'm actually being interviewed by Shri, who is another PM who uses a lot of AI. So we're actually going to go through the same thing. Let me actually break it down. These are great questions, by the way. But for people who can stick around, trust me, it'll be worth your while. So let's talk about what actually happened. Like, what exactly did Anna do? Or what exactly did I do, right? Everything starts with the app download. Good thing about using AI is that we didn't really spend a lot of time messing around with the data. We just took that data as is. There was no cleansing. If you guys know, cleaning data takes a lot of time. And the good news about using AI, structured or unstructured, is that we did zero cleansing. And we just dumped it in, right? And it's good enough for us to give us the signals that we want. Like, we just did it over 100 lines. But if you do it over 1,000 lines, that noise from not cleaning the data is just going to go away. Because what you really want is you want to have an overall picture of positive, negative, and what people want, because those are your growth signals, right? Your positive growth signals is how you actually acquire more customers. Your negative growth signals is how you actually is a retention risk, so you need to fix it. And what features they want is your customer acquisition, or is how you can grow your product more. And so you just take the data as is and you start there. Now, what we also did is that instead of just asking a simple question, we asked using a well-structured prompt. And here, let's break that down, because I know that there were some people who are asking about prompts. So let's do that. So here's the prompt we use. And when I talk about a well-structured prompt, by the way, it actually has what I call the 5 keys. And you need the 5 keys to actually unlock great responses or high-quality responses that are actionable, that are not generic. Number 1 is you need to assign it a role. You got to give AI a personality, right? And so you give it an experience and you make it an expert. And in this case, what we did was we gave an experience about a person who builds great products. And we said that you're an expert in synthesizing user feedback. Second key is we actually gave them the input, which is as simple as, in this case, attaching the file. Third is we actually gave it instructions of what to do with the input. And remember, in this instructions is where you as PMs, or we as PMs, can put our intelligence into the machine, right? We can say how we want it to analyze it. We can say, make sure that things that we can mitigate, such as remove selection bias and recency bias. We can talk about all the best practices that we know, inherently know about how to do and analyze data. We can put it into our instructions. This is how you get the AI to do the work for you, because you tell it how you want it to, what do you want it to do with the input in the data. You can also say what kind of feedback you want. Now, there was a gentleman earlier, I think, I forget who asked, but what if you actually don't want positive, negative, and features requested? Well, just change the instructions. So if you want to get something else out of this, you just change the analysis. And so you can get it customized to exactly what you want. And I always like to give it a format, which is key number 4. And in the format, I tell them exactly how I want it, because I tell them the way I want it so that it's easier for me to consume that information, which means that when it's easy for me to consume that information, I can quickly read it, and then I can do something with it. There is a 5th key, which is to give it a good example. And when I do analysis, I actually don't give it a good example. But in some of the other prompts that you'll see, you will see that has good examples. The reason you don't want to add a good example in an analysis is because then that good example is going to skew the data of what it's going to analyze. So you see a lot of people saying, well, always give it an example. Well, yes, it just depends on the task itself. And so understanding the nuances about how an AI works and what does a well-structured prompt look like is a large part of how you can get AI to respond in the way you want it to respond, right? So that's number 1. Second is, I use this something called a playbook, and that's for a very good reason, right? One of the questions I get out of this is, Mustafa, this is great, but I'm not going to write a prompt that is 1 page long every time I need to do this. And that's fair, which is why when you think about the way this prompt is written, it's very much reusable. I wrote this once. If I want to put a different transcript in, the only thing I need to do is attach a different transcript. The only thing that changes is the red. So by writing a prompt once and putting it into the playbook, that just helps you keep reusing the prompt again and again and again, and that actually saves you time, right? The third strategy we used was we actually chose Claude over OpenAI or ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity. And the reason for that is when I mentioned earlier, is that each LLM, even though they do the same thing, the way they work are inherently a little bit different. And because of that, you can actually get very different answers. And so knowing the capabilities of each LLM and for what to do and what not to do is just as important as what is the task that you can give them or the way you write the prompt. And the last but not the least is that we actually put it within the Anna Copilot context. And by doing that, by running the prompt within the Copilot, what you're doing is you're actually making it more personal. There was a question about what does that Copilot look like? So let's go into here and see if it's still there. Now, in this case, what I've done in the Copilot is I have actually trained it on my playbook itself so it knows to run it. And I've also trained it on the profile of Anna itself. And the profile in this case, I think it has only 3 or 4 pieces of data information. Number 1, it talks about Anna in a role, so it knows what Anna does. Second, it talks about the product that she's building. Third, it talks about company OKRs. And fourth, it talks about a team structure. Now, you can go as deep as you want in this profile or not, but this is good enough for me to get this results. Every time, let me step back. There's an art to how much information to give AI, right? If you listen to what most people say, they say, well, the context windows are so great, what does it matter? Just put in everything. The problem is that's not how AI works best. And if you've heard it, what AI does is that AI is very good at, it gets confused very easily. It's very good at retaining the first thing, what's on the top, and it's very good at retaining what's on the bottom. And sometimes it forgets what's in the middle. And so the context that you put in is just as important. So you'll see people saying, well, you know what, the context window is 2,000 characters, 200,000 characters, just put everything in. That is not how you get AI to be more prescriptive to you or to be more personalized to you. Understanding the right level of context and input is just as important. And by the way, that does not just apply to what you put in the Copilot. That actually applies to this entire playbook. So let's take a different one, right? So for example, if you want to just use the Copilot, if you want to use AI to just do brainstorming, this prompt follows the same structure. The 5 keys, the role, the input, the instructions, the format, and the good example. But then it also has what I think is probably the most efficient input that you can give so that you can actually get great results. And knowing what is efficient and what is not efficient takes some time, right? This is where when students come to my class, we spend a lot of time talking about how much to give, how much not to give. Because if you give too much, it leads the conversation or forgets. If you give too little, it guesses. And so if you have struggled with AI and giving you good responses, take a look at how you're asking the question and take a look at what input you're giving it, because that will make a big difference. Now, all of this, frankly speaking, is a pain, right? It would be great if AI just asked a question and AI knew exactly what he wants. But there's a method to the madness. If you follow this structure, I will tell you that it will save you lots of time and it will make you a much more effective PM. Right? That's the whole ballgame. Right? Everything that we do with AI, is at the end of the day, why do we do it? We do it because either we want to save time or B, we want to actually be better at our jobs. And so if you follow a structured format, that's what it's going to give you. And by the way, if you do it again and again and again, you're just going to get better at it. I've been doing this for the last 2 years. I can actually take a look at the response and I know exactly how I can get more out of it. And that's where you want to be too, right? That is what it means, in my opinion, to master AI. One last thing before we go. So the question I get is, well, if I just do these 4 things, will I get great responses? I wish the answer was yes, but there's a lot more to this. And this is where I go deeper into the class, is that what we did here today is I just showed you 4 strategies. If you actually want to go even deeper, understanding how to break tasks into small micro tasks is just as important. How do you evaluate LLM responses? How do you know that something that LLM's giving you is good or not so good? And so I share with you what are my litmus tests that I use to do that. How do you work with LLMs in which we don't hallucinate, that it doesn't do biases, and that we're secure with our data? Number 9 is probably, in my opinion, probably the most important piece, is that people either expect too much out of AI or they expect too little out of AI. And it always ends up disappointing them. And so having the right mindset and having the right expectation is just as important as all of these other 10 strategies. Because if you know what the AI can do, then you know how you can push the limits, which is why I always start with an unstructured prompt, because I want to know what the baseline is. And then I go and try to make it better. And you saw what a big difference it made from the baseline response to what we're able to do just by using 4 strategies. And then last but not the least is, doesn't matter how good your strategy is, you're always going to get in trouble because AI has its own personality and quirks. And so how do you pull out of the rabbit hole? And so there's about 6 troubleshooting guides that I have about how to do that. So if any of this is interesting to you, if you would like to learn all of these 10 strategies about how you can actually use AI, then consider my course. It starts in about 2 weeks. And I will tell you, the students who have gone through my course, and I've had lucky enough that I've trained over 1,500 students so far in the course and outside the course, that they are consistently saving 10 hours per week. They're definitely getting better results than most PMs are. And if you want to run circles around your peers, now's the time to do it. And I talk about now a lot simply because I think we are still very much in the early stages of how PMs are using AI. If you wait for, say, about a year, if you learn how to use AI effectively now, you're going to be ahead of the curve. If you wait for a year, you're going to be at the curve. And if you wait for 2 years, you're going to be behind the curve. And so if you're looking to use AI to differentiate, to look at, to be the person in your team who's becoming more productive. And there's a lot of, and I spend most of my time actually working with CPOs to help with product team efficiency and effectiveness. They are looking for people within the organizations who can lead the charge. And so this is your opportunity to do that. So if any of that sounds interesting, consider the boot camp. You can actually get $100 off. Prices are going to increase on 128. So with that being said, I do apologize for going late. This is the link again. If you guys don't have it, I'll put it back on the chat and I'll take questions. Oh yes, tomorrow what time? I will actually give you the link for that. So let me do that so you can sign up. Give me 1 second, I'll find that link. Rushi, I saw that you had to leave. Thank you for saying that. Ravi, thank you. This is great. We'll be sharing the playbook and prompts. I think it's in the link. Tomorrow's meeting is 9 a.m. set. Yes, would this course be helpful to designers trying to transition to PM track? You know what? I will tell you this, that our profession is going to a point in which there is going to be a mix of roles. PMs, designers, and to a certain extent, engineers are going to be able to do each other's work, right? The roles and the silos that we know of are collapsing. So, June, I don't know if you're still on or not. Understanding, if you're a designer, and if you understand how a PM does his or her job better, that just puts you in a much more powerful situation, right? And vice versa, by the way. The second thing I will tell you is that as these roles are collapsing, in my opinion, the PM role is where it's going to collapse towards. And this is for very simple reasons, right? If you think about where AI is going, most of the AI focus is on how to use AI to do development. Because that is where it's the most expensive for companies, is development and engineering. As AI gets better at development and engineering, which means that it gets cheaper and cheaper to build things, do you know what gets harder and harder? Deciding what to build. And guess who is the one who decides what to build? It's us PMs. And so you're going to get into this world in which it's going to be very easy to push out code. But when you push out so much code, you have to be even more judicious about what to build. And the skills about what to build, to listen to customers, to understand how you can actually take that data and turn that into what is a customer problem and turn that into a feature and figure out how that feature is going to impact the customer and the business. The only people who can do that or who've been trained to do that are PMs. So, sorry, June, very, very long answer to your question, but yes, I would highly encourage it if this is where you want to go. Diana, it is PST, and I will give you the link. Well, Anna, thank you very much. Can you also share the recording for today? Yes, I will do that as well. That was from Joel. Christoph, great, thanks. This was excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. All right, I owe you guys a link. Let me just go to Sri. Here you go. So if you sign on to this, you will get, I'm going to go through something very similar tomorrow. Meeting group chat. Diane, thank you very, very much for your kind words. I don't think so. I've heard you rock for a long time, so I appreciate it. But yes, if you join me tomorrow with Shri, we're gonna go through this. I'm actually gonna go through this, and I'm actually gonna show a lot more. So I'm gonna go through and say, how do you take this and then I come out with the features that you want to build. So it's gonna be in a bit more extended. But that is it, unless you guys have any questions. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I really don't know why it didn't auto record, because that's what it does. I have it set up on auto recording. But I will post a partial, and then once I get Shwee's stuff done, then I'll post the whole thing. Anything else? Any other questions? Good. So with that being said, let me end our session, and thank you for being here. And again, if you are interested in learning how to do all of these things, then please take a look at the course, and I'll send you more details over email. Mega, thank you very much for your kind words. Diane, thanks once again. June, thanks again. And I will see you guys later. Thank you guys. Bye for now.